What's going on, everybody? It's Joel here, and today we're going to be doing the review of the TYR CXT-1 training shoes. Alright, so the time has finally come to talk about the CXT-1s from TYR. These have probably been my most requested shoe review this year, and for good reason. These things have been all over the CrossFit Spaces media and on pretty much all of the athletes. TYR has taken pretty much anyone that didn't have a contract and signed them, given them shoes. So you saw these all over the CrossFit Games this year, and more recently on the Rogue Invitational. I've had these shoes for probably about 6 months now. I got them back in May, and they have probably been my most used training shoe this year. I did not do a review earlier on, even though I probably could have, because I really wanted to think about what I was going to say about these shoes. It's not every day that a brand new company emerges, or a new company in the training space emerges and puts out some training shoes. We've had 2 this year, which is already a lot, but both of them have taken a little bit of a different approach when it came into how they wanted to handle coming into the market. TYR's approach to it was to try to get these on as many feet as possible as they could at the CrossFit Games. So you saw the CXT-1s on more than half of the field at the Games, which was pretty crazy considering that these shoes weren't really tried and tested at all. I think their gamble paid off for them though, because these shoes are all the hype right now. But anyways, today we're gonna be talking about the performance of the CXT-1s and the durability of the shoe. A lot of times when I do shoe reviews, I don't really get to talk about the durability of them because I've only been using them for a couple weeks. These shoes I've been using over the last 6 months, and I can finally talk about how they've held up over the last 6 months. But first off, let's talk about the construction of these shoes. Starting, of course, with the upper of the shoe. So first off, we have a mesh material that spans across the lateral side around the toe box and then through to the medial side of the shoe. On that mesh material, there are perforations for breathability, and I would say this upper material is very, very comfortable. It bends easily, there's no hot spots, there's like a little inner layer there that kind of cradles your toes. Overall, very good job in that area. And the durability is actually pretty good. So far I've probably done about 50 rope climbs in this shoe, and there really hasn't been any kind of wear to the mesh material, which you would think there would be because it's a softer material. Another thing that I will comment on is that it does a pretty good job of staying clean, though I have washed the shoe 2 times so far, and every time I've washed it, it's come out sparkly white. And if you were on the fence about getting the white shoe because you didn't want to have to deal with it becoming dirty, I'd say don't worry about that. These are really easy to wash. Just throw them in the washing machine on cold and then air dry them. The second material on the upper is around the back part, and it's a micro suede material that's a little bit on the shiny side, and personally it's not my cup of tea. They asked me if there was anything that I would change about the shoe, and I told them it would be that material. I think it looks a little bit on the cheap side, but they did say that they would use different materials or different micro suedes, namely the one from the L1 lifters in that area for certain colorways. So on this back part, there is the TYR logo embossed into it, which I think is not a bad look. Around on the other side, there are the TYR wings embossed into that side, and then that micro suede material carries on throughout the eye stays of the shoe, which there's no elaborate lacing system or anything, but it does do a good job securing the shoe in that area. The tongue on this shoe is nice and cushioned, and it stays in place. It is gusseted on the side, so it does not shift around when you work out in the shoe. So I'm shooting my B-roll now, and one thing that I forgot to add into the review was that I think the laces are pretty bad. They're rigid, they hold their shape, and they come untied pretty easily, especially when you're doing rope climbs, so you definitely have to double knot these guys. So one thing that I will admit is that these are a pre-production shoe, and the back part of the shoe is The only thing that they changed between this one and the actual release model. So on the back part of this shoe, it opens up and kind of cups your heel into place. But the problem I had about that, and I told them this early on, is that it does rub the back of your Achilles. I told them that I would change that. They already had another design in mind, and that's the actual release one where it's smoothed out in the back. And I told them that that was probably the way to go for the general public. So I can't really comment on how that part feels on the release model of the shoe, but I will say that I would expect it to be better than this one because this is kind of uncomfortable the way that it is here. All right, so one of the standout design features of the CXT-1s is their pretty massive lateral medial rope guard and stability frame. So it spans pretty much through the mid part of the shoe, around the heel where it comes to a point so you can do handstand push-ups, which I do admit works pretty well, and then it goes all the way through to the medial side, which acts as a rope climbing gripper. So it's ribbed and it has all these little edges on it, and I actually think it looks pretty cool. It has this like wavy, organic look to it. I don't know if it's they designed it to look like water because they're a swimming company first and foremost, but it does a really good job in stabilizing the heel and the midfoot of the shoe because it does come out at certain points of the sides of the shoe to cup your foot in place. And while it is rigid, it is not completely inflexible. Obviously, you can see me torquing the shoe side to side, but it does hold your foot where it needs to be. Its use for rope climbing is very good, and I would say that these are probably my favorite shoes for rope climbing right now. They do an amazing job gripping the rope, going up, and they stay on your feet when you slide down the rope. It's pretty easy to go in a free fall and just slide down the rope in these shoes. And they don't come off your feet, which I really like. The medial part of the shoe is indeed showing some wear, but that is pretty typical from like a TPU plastic or rubber when you're doing rope climbs. It hasn't worn down that much, but it is worth noting that that part is not indestructible. So taking a look at the outsole, you'll find a pretty similar traction pattern that they're using on the L1 lifters that I already did a review of, and I had absolutely nothing bad to say about the rubber material that they're using. It's actually a pretty good amount of rubber, and it's very, very grippy. And like the lifters, if I were to pick out another standout feature of this shoe, it would be the amount of grip that it has. The rubber that they're using is excellent. And you get an extended part that goes and cups around the front of the shoe for doing things like wall walks and for helping you get up during burpees. Taking a look at the profile of the bottom of the shoe, we predominantly have a flat contact outsole, though there is a slight toe spring with this shoe and a little bit of a groove in the midfoot of the shoe so the rope can channel through. It's not something that you feel when you have these shoes on. And a teeny tiny rocker to make running easier. I would say these shoes have a very direct feeling with the ground, and it was very surprising to hear that the drop on these shoes is 9 millimeters. I thought they were much flatter than they were initially. TYR is calling the midsole foam that they're using on the CXT-1s Surge NRG. And I think the name is fancier than it actually is. It is a very direct feeling midsole foam. It's not soft by any means. It's very dense, and it lends itself more towards stability than comfort. It does a pretty good job of absorbing impact, but it is not the most comfortable for doing like plyometric movements, but we'll talk about that a little bit later on. So inside of the shoe, we do have a removable anatomical sock liner. I think that it's comfortable, it doesn't slip around, and it's breathable, but if you wanted to take it out and put in your own orthotics, you can definitely do that with the CXT-1s. The weight of these shoes is actually pretty good. It's 12.5 ounces for a men's size 10. I think that was 354 grams. I can't remember off the top of my head, but that falls into a pretty good sweet spot when it comes to training shoes. It's not too light and it's not too heavy, so you could do pretty much anything in these shoes without worrying about the weight. All right, so when it comes to fit and sizing your CXT-1s, I got these in a size 10 and they fit my feet like perfectly. Like I wouldn't have it any other way. Keep in mind, I don't have wide feet. And I think that even though while these have a anatomically shaped toe box. It's not a very wide one. And I think with all the hype regarding their L1 lifters and having a wide toe box, people are going to be disappointed in the actual width of the toe box of the CXT-1 trainers. If you have wide feet, I would definitely recommend that you size these shoes up because they're gonna fit you a little bit on the tighter side. I was actually talking to an athlete at the games and he told me that these shoes fit him on the narrow side, but after a little bit of break-in, they became easier for him to wear. However, if you were worried about it, I would just go with that half size up and I think you'd be fine. If you have normal or narrow feet, going with your normal training shoe size would be ideal. For me, like I said, these fit perfectly. There's really no pressure points throughout the whole shoe, and I really like that about it. Sometimes shoes that have raised lateral and sidewalls can poke into the sides of your feet, but I never noticed that with the CXT-1s. Generally, I think these are a very comfortable fitting shoe, and they don't have any kind of heel slip. But I do have to also say that I have not tried the production models that have the more rounded Achilles part of the shoe, so I can't comment on if those ones have heel slip or not. Though if that was a problem, there's an extra lace hole so that you can lace lock these shoes if there was an issue with any kind of heel slip. All right, so when it comes to running, I thought these shoes were not very good. I think that they are usable. They're definitely palatable for most of the runs that you're gonna do in a CrossFit workout up to like 400 meters. But every time that I use these for a running heavy workout, like I used these for Murph and I immediately regretted it. I thought they were a little bit clunky, a little bit harsh on your feet. Like there's not a whole lot of cushioning there. But if you're used to that with most other training shoes, it shouldn't be that big a deal. Like I said, it's definitely usable, but I would not say that these excel at running by any means. I will say, however, that they are comfortable enough to do plyometric movements. They are flexible, they're lightweight, and most of all, they're responsive. So if you're looking for a shoe that you can do quick turns in, I think the CXT-1s are gonna be an excellent choice for you. Though the midsole isn't particularly soft or comfortable, it does still do a pretty good job in absorbing impact from double unders and box jumps. It definitely leans more towards the responsive side. So if you were more, I guess, competition focused, then this would be an excellent choice for plyometric movements. Where I think the CXT-1s shine the most is when it comes to lifting. I thought that these had a very direct and strong ground feel. The foam that they're using, like I said, it's not soft or mushy, it's more on the dense side. And I think the feel of it reminds me the most of Nano 5s. Those shoes had a very direct feeling forefoot with the ground. Obviously, these do have a higher heel because of that 9mm drop, but like I said, it generally feels pretty flat. These shoes excel for your slower lifts such as squats and deadlifts. The foam that they're using is dense, power delivery is excellent, the base on this shoe is wide and stable, and even though they do have a 9mm drop, it's not something that you really notice. Before they told me what it was, I thought it was a 4 or 6mm drop. It starts kind of high at the very back part of the shoe, but then flattens out and then gradually slopes down to the very front of the shoe where it almost drops off a little too much at the very, very front of the shoe. I was still able to pull a pretty big deadlift in these shoes, 505 with pretty relative ease. My squats felt great in these shoes. Front squats or back squats both felt very good. And most of the barbell cycling and Olympic weightlifting that I did in these shoes felt very solid. The only thing that I did not like to do in the CXT-1s was full snatches. So full squat snatches in these shoes were the bane of my existence, and that's because that drop is kind of noticeable there. So I think the flaw in the design of these shoes is that they lack foam at the very, very front of the shoe. It almost feels like there's no foam there. So when you go to grip the ground with your toes when you're landing a snatch, you kind of feel like there's nothing at the very front of the shoe and it pitches you forward. So I was losing a lot of snatches forward because I would just get rolled on forward to my toes, and I would find that I would collapse more towards the medial side of my foot at the very, very front. But other than that, when it came to power anything, I had no problems. When it came to cleans, I had no problems. Jerks also felt very stable. The only thing I did not like was squat snatching in these shoes. Okay, so overall durability, these shoes have held up great. There's almost nothing wrong with them. Like I said on my other shoe, there's a little bit of burn on the rope guard, but otherwise the shoes have held up great. I've washed them 2 times in the washing machine and they come out almost perfect. One weird thing is that the midsole got stained from the washing machine, and I used dye-free detergent. I washed them with some other shoes, but they were also white shoes, so I don't know where that blue staining came from. That's kind of weird. The midsole is compressing a little bit at the forefoot. You can see it more at the heel part of the shoe, but I don't think that is without reason. And overall, throughout my half a year of pretty daily training in these shoes, I think they're gonna hold up just fine. And the overall build quality is actually really nice with these shoes. They feel very solid, even though they are a first run and first generation shoe. So kudos to TYR with picking a good manufacturer for their shoes. Okay, so in conclusion, the CXT-1s retail for $130, which is the standard price of training shoes. Some of the fancier colorways do clock up to $140, but I don't think that is without reason, even though they are generally the same shoe. Sometimes they will come with different materials, but we'll see about that in the future. Another problem is that these are mainly sold out on TYR and on the Wildlife. So if you're looking to buy them, you might be waiting for a long time. So I think the CXT-1s are a very good training shoe. They are not without their little problems. Like I said, I think they could use a little bit more foam right at the very toe part of the shoe. I don't love the 9mm drop, but I also don't hate it. The looks of these shoes, like I said, are probably the worst part to me. They're a little plain. Some of the upcoming colorways that I've seen have been pretty cool, so I think when I get those, my mind might change a little bit. But overall, the shoe to me feels like it's a very safe shoe. Like, the looks are safe. They didn't do anything crazy as far as what they wanted to excel in performance. They're more towards stability than towards comfort. And I think a lot of the shoes nowadays are actually trending more towards the comfortable side rather than being on the stable side. So this shoe to me feels like they took the blueprint of a tried and true shoe maybe about 5 years ago, and they put their own spin on it. So everything about this shoe is actually pretty good. There's no glaring flaws, which makes for a very good training experience. The only people that I would not recommend these shoes to are somebody that's looking for more of a comfortable training shoe and will sacrifice some of the stability of a shoe for that comfort. These are definitely on the more firmer feeling side. And while I think that's fine for training, this is not a shoe that you're gonna wanna wear all day, every day. But if you're okay with wearing this shoe for only a couple hours in the gym, I think the CXT-1s are a really good training shoe. They do everything well, nothing too standoutish, but I think overall the complete package is here with the CXT-1s, and I highly recommend them. If you guys have any questions about the CXT-1 training shoes, feel free to leave them in the comment section. And as always guys, please hit that like button, subscribe, and thanks for watching.